Hey guys, have a seat, make yourselves comfortable. We'll get started hopefully very shortly here.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad, how are you?
Doing alright, doing alright. You know, we're still waiting on Giza.
Yes. Did Drago bring come up to you?
I'm not actually sure.
I mean, Drago thinks he's going to come over.
Well, yes, but...
I spoke to him on my way to the dealer's room.
Okay, cool. So, hopefully he'll be able to free himself up.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's just a printout of what we already have on the schedule online.
It should be. It's the weird
Yeah.
thing here. Can I start for 1500? Larvae, form publisher. Discord meetup. Sweet. I kind of want to vamp, and I kind of like we're not at the start time yet, so maybe I'll just want to sit quietly instead. It's fine. You can ask questions now. I mean, we might say we're going to talk about that later. I don't actually plan. So.
Yeah, neither do I, at all.
Does anyone have any questions that they want to start out with while we're killing time?
Don't do it.
Don't do it? Yeah, it's probably good advice, really.
I mean, that's the entire reason I'm here, to convince you not to do it.
And, yeah, don't.
Don't.
The funny thing is,
But most of you that are here probably already, made up your minds, so we're here to make sure you have the least pain possible.
Hey, we got microphones this year.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Weird. I was taking them off the back row, but if you can get... Okay, that works.
That's direct.
Yeah, there was only one up here.
Problem solving for conventions, 101. It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
unless it's a
100%
union
of the
show.
time.
What he just said.
Unless it's a union show.
Oh, I'm not hearing this. I'm not hearing this.
Look, if you didn't see it move, then there's poltergeists.
I mean,
No one from the union's in here, right? Good. I think we're
Wait,
good.
do you know how to ask those questions? Is anyone in here from the union? Anyone? No, I guess not.
is it time for a break yet?
Yeah.
All right.
We should probably give a few minutes.
Yeah, we'll get it.
Yeah.
We're just killing
Yeah,
time.
we'll just kill some time. We'll take some
Quiet
questions. We can even tell some stories.
Babble.
No, that's tonight. That's much later when
Well,
I'm much angrier.
Convention.
Well, I'm not on that panel yet, or at all, so...
So when I put together the con horror stories panel for tonight, I talked to the angrier people that I knew, like Alkali.
If you don't think I'm angry, you don't know me.
I guess not.
So actually, before we get too far started, since we have a lot of people in here, and this doesn't impact our content too much, is anyone here like, where is everyone on this concept? Like, are you all sitting here going, I'd really like to start one locally, or some of you like, I've already started down this dark path, and
Let's
I
do
wanna
the,
avoid that, or what?
Let's do it. So, show of hands. You have not started an event and are here to find out maybe why you should or should not do it.
Sweet.
Okay.
All right.
What about
now,
the rest of you?
who here has already staffed or is part of an event and just wants to find out more?
Right.
Yay.
80%.
Thank you very much.
Who here has no intention of starting an event, does not staff, and is just here to confirm your beliefs that it's something you're not supposed to be doing?
Good call.
Respect. Nothing but respect.
That's a very honest place to be. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got to figure we'll wait another minute or two.
So the general advice, and we'll repeat it a little bit, for those of you that are looking, so for those of you who are looking to start an event, which of you have not staffed anything yet either?
Oh,
okay.
so you're doing this completely out of the blue.
Yes.
That is a bold move. We will get to that.
Yeah.
Because we have specific advice on that one, having done it last year and not having talked about what we're going to talk about. I think we're all on the same page on that one.
Yeah.
The short answer is, oh boy, do you want to staff an event that somebody else is running first, if you can at all manage it. Conveniently, there's an event right here, right now, where you could start by being a volunteer. There's work for you to do, but seriously, like, go staff an event, go ask questions. Don't sign a contract yet.
Yeah, we'll talk about contracts a little bit later and how scary they can be when you don't read them correctly.
Of the people here, who here is not necessarily looking to start a full-blown convention, but a smaller thing like a one-day meet or like a one-day overnight thing?
Those are a pretty good place to start.
Right on.
Yeah, that's definitely a much better place to start. You can kind of feel it out, and there's a lot less overhead and a lot less liability and responsibility that you're going to be dealing with during your first event, especially if you can find a good venue that doesn't really cost much or anything.
Yeah. Lots of people do stuff like that. Lots of people do successful events like that that don't ever really grow past that, and there's
They don't
no
need to.
wrong thing
Yeah.
there.
Like there's one down in Connecticut called Furry Picnic that's been doing that for years and years now. I don't know exactly where they do it, but I know it's just a single day event. A bunch of people come together, they have a picnic, they hang out. There's no real dedicated schedule. It's more of a meetup for furries. Local furries has kind of gotten a little big and has a little bit of their own branded swag. That's usually a really good place to start, and if you get the momentum, you can move from there. But you don't want to try to jump over that first.
Here's somebody who'd have opinions on this subject.
Oh yeah.
We're not asking you here.
Hey, it's Kit.
And
Also, somebody who's made a terrible set of choices in his life.
an interesting angle on that. So Jay mentioned the Furry Picnic. The people who ran the Furry and still run the Furry Picnic staffed an Anthrocon for many years. And Furry Migration was founded by someone who staffed here for many years. So there's certainly a staff one con to learn it and maybe start your own. But I'd say we're ready to officially start. Why don't we do introductions?
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm
Who are you?
Crimson. I'm Crimson. I do a lot of things for a number of different events. So I'm one of the duty officers here on the security team. I also run the corporate, I run a group called Software Engineering Infrastructure for MFF. We basically do your multi-year event-wide IT stuff. So reg systems and art show management and knowledge transfer stuff. So that's fun. The other thing that I've done is I was the con chair and on the staff for the local science fiction fantasy convention while I was in college, which was a really interesting experience because that's like a 250, 350 person event. So like I've seen large and small, like MagFest, 22,000 person event. I've worked at those. I've worked all the way down to 100 person events. So full range.
And then on our far left,
Hi, I'm Dragor, commonly found in suit while running events, but I'm trying this unmasking thing lately. It's weird.
So weird.
It's really weird. I actually got started with event running stuff for a group that runs Dungeons and Dragons tournaments at Gen Con. That's a little bit weird in that we will run through in a weekend more people than a lot of first-year FurCons, an entire weekend through our events, so that's how I got started. Otherwise, with Alkali and the rest, we founded First Squared 5 years ago now, and then I throw my hat in here, Indie FurCon, Motor City, Anthrohio, Gateway Fur Meet. I'm basically a sucker to say yes to staffing if you're a Midwest con. It's really horrible. Oh, you guys got me 2 years ago at MagFest too.
Oh, yeah,
that is
you
one
did.
of the more interesting experiences I have ever had. I am dying to go back.
MagFest is unique. I'm just going to put it that way. I refuse to ever staff that convention, no matter
I
what.
had so much fun staffing it.
I have so much fun attending it, and I don't want to lose that because
And that's-
every time I staff a convention, I can never go back as an attendee.
so who are you, Jay?
Yeah, good point. So I'm Haybuck, also known as Jade. I'm your Anthrocon Help Twitter person this weekend. I got my start with convention running at BronyCon 2012. Kind of came in through the pony fandom. I've always been a furry, but I kind of broke in there. They were very hard up for staff. They were a convention that was successful, but they didn't really have a lot of experience. I came in as just someone who was checking online for just the pulse of what people think of us, and within a month of that, I was promoted to Director of Public Relations with no prior experience or understanding of what the job required. So from there, I went into operations at that convention, con ops at that operation, or at that convention. I've chaired BabsCon, which is a San Francisco pony con, still happening today. And I met this guy in Philadelphia at a convention called SmothCon, which is a convention for convention runners. And after I met him, I was very quickly dragged into Anthrocon, which has led me into many, many other cons. I volunteered at MFF, Fur Fright before it went down. I cannot keep track of the amount of conventions I've helped at or helped run, but the big project, and honestly one of my bigger regrets, was founding a convention in Boston called DrawCon. That was a 3-year convention that was mildly successful for the first 2 years, and we're going to get into what happened on the 3rd year as a bit of a cautionary tale for those of you who really want to jump in without any experience a little bit later. So I don't want to spoil that for you.
Cool. And as for me, Giza, I've been staffing this con since 2000. I was a full director on the board for 14 years, at which point I decided I'm old and I'm eligible for parole, so I'm now a director emeritus, which means I have that cool title, but I have less work to do. And what I do for this con now is I run social media, which is the main Anthrocon account, and our presence everywhere else. And oh god, it's a fire hose during the con. It's basically a full-time job during the con. And I've worked a bunch of other cons, Fur Fright, MagFest a few times, Midwest Fur Fest, Eurofurts when I'm able to make it, probably a few others I'm forgetting, and my staffing career has kind of transitioned from doing like operations and security earlier on in the 2000s. Now I'm doing things like social media and VIP/guest of honor relations. I'm the VIP liaison at Anthro New England, for example, so I get to do things like help schedule travel itineraries for the guests of honor and get them to all their panels and whatnot, and it's sometimes like herding cats.
It's always like herding cats.
So that's for the introductions.
Yeah.
And we each kind of got our own list of things we'd like to talk about, which would be well over an hour just for each of us. And we kind of covered a little about like how to kick off / see if there's a need for running a con. Do you want to talk about that anymore?
Yeah, definitely. So it sounds like I'm the only person on this panel that's actually founded a convention from scratch. Is that right?
No, that's.
Oh, right. No, you said
outline
First Squared. You said First Squared. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I am so sorry.
I had to roll an FCN back when it got founded. They were the FCN
Yeah.
guys. They came to ops for a few years to work, then they started pumping me for information on how to run a con. It was great.
That's basically how it goes.
I was
Yeah.
with a group of people who almost started a con.
What was the line? Wait. What was the line you said that got them not to?
No, actually, this was with other experienced staffers, and we're wondering if we could maybe start an event in this area, and sort of started. Process-wise, it was we got some people together, we kicked off a mailing list to sort of hash it out, and then we didn't get anywhere. We didn't really have anything going. One person moved. It's basically completely flopped, and that's fine because it flopped for free.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys have actually started ones, but I can definitely tell you, it's failed cheaply.
Yeah. If you're gonna back out early on.
So let's talk about budget. How do you guys do yours? When you've had a budget, what assumptions do you make?
So in general, the biggest thing the two big things for an event and how Outline and I have done it is in part luck with what we're able to negotiate. If you can get what we do.
Yeah.
Because it's all venue dependent, regardless of whether you say you're a furry con or a brony con, though sometimes that does matter. Fun fact, any place that's used to having anime cons and you come to them, in general, furry cons go smoother than anime cons, and so sometimes your venue gets scared that another anime con is coming to them, and it might take a year to show off, no, we're crazy, but in a different way. As far as budget goes, the two main things that happen is there's your convention space and food and beverage. Those are the two main things as far as a contract with the hotel's gonna go. The third big thing, if you're doing overnight in rooms, is that. But aside from that, the thing that we kind of pride ourselves on is we don't pay for convention space in our contracts if we can. We convince the hotel to give us that for free, and that we will spend in a way that makes their numbers look better. Hotels, if you rent out convention space, they do it just by the sheer nature of that's how they're drawing the events in, but that's not really where they show how successful they are.
Room nights.
Yep, it's
Room nights and then food and beverage.
Yeah,
At
food,
First Squared,
F&B.
per attendee, we have a bit of a higher F&B than most other of the smaller Midwest cons right now.
But you guys kind of, that's part of your shtick at this point.
It became that way just through negotiations. It didn't start that way as an intention. It was just financially more sound for us to do it that way.
Yeah, so that's, we could roll off on a lot of tangents there, but it is, yeah, so, and if you can get a corkage waiver protected. But seriously, there's contracts with hotels are going to be room nights, event space, F&B, and you can flex those a little bit. So you can you can get some room to negotiate on. So a prime example would be like you want bring your room night rate down, right? Because you want your people to be able to attend for as cheaply as possible, and that's the one direct cost that they're going to see. So you can maybe get a break on stuff like bringing the room rate down by going, well, we'll spend this much on F&B. It's a negotiation process, but those are the three sort of levers that you're going to see.
I guess the big thing for room nights that even recently, IFC, one of our in-person meetings, we got burned a little bit on not being careful with it. So hotels have room blocks, right? Even if you're not taking over the whole hotel, like if a hotel has 300 rooms and you're a smaller event, like, all right, we're going to tell in this contract, we're going to slot 100 rooms. The other big thing you have to watch out for in your contract is what are the different penalties, where do you break even, and where do you get more benefits? So in general, attrition.
Yep.
So 80% is usually pretty common.
Yeah, 80% is pretty much the industry standard.
That's something that is negotiable per venue. The amount of wiggle room depends on the time of year you're in, how much your venue is really in need for business. Us at First Squared, we're in Wisconsin the last weekend of February. We essentially get strong negotiating power because at any given instant, a western blizzard could hit and screw over our event, and it happened our first year. Holy cow. But we were able to lean into them and go, you're not, we looked at their event schedule. So we went in with, well, we don't have to be on this weekend. They're like, no, please bring people to we're Wisconsin in the winter, please.
Yes.
Now, an interesting thing about, you mentioned regions there, and getting back to like F&B and function space and whatnot, this will vary by region. So for example, the East Coast, a lot of the cities tend to be union controlled, so that drives up prices for things like F&B. So for example, we used to have, years and years ago, we had a super sponsor lounge here that was in a suite up in the West End, and we brought our own food, but the hotel's like, we want some of that, so we also ordered some catering from them to supplement the food in the super sponsor lounge, so they got their cut. And then eventually we scaled out of that, we just couldn't do it anymore because it became cost prohibitive at that point. Contrast with Midwest Fur Fest, Chicago is not a union-controlled town, and if any of you've ever been to Midwest Fur Fest, they have a huge con suite for all attendees. They have like chips, and they have their own soda machine. It's amazing, and they can
do not praise that soda machine.
That
you will trigger flashbacks to anyone who's worked with it.
So if you ever think that what's going to be a cool idea for your brand new con is to get a soda machine, don't do it.
Yeah.
Like, you can have a brand new con, don't get a freaking soda machine. And if you do get a soda machine, pay somebody else to clean it. That was the big thing that MFF has run into a number of times. The pain in the ass to move, and somebody's got to clean it. The nice thing is you can pay somebody to do a lot of that stuff for you. There was a question over here.
Yeah, I thought I saw a
Gentleman in
hand
the gray
raised over
shirt.
here.
Did you raise your hand for a question?
Just going back to 80%. 80% for what specifically?
Oh, yeah, we should probably actually define attrition for you guys, because a lot of you guys probably don't know what it is. So basically, when you have a room block, let's say it's a room block of 100 room nights, and you have an 80% attrition, that means you've agreed that you will fill at minimum 80% of the rooms, so 80 of the rooms for that 100 night room block, or 100 room block. This is assuming it's a single night.
Yeah.
So if you do not meet that 80%, you as an event are liable for the price, the difference in price up to that 80% is generally what it winds up being. So if you only fill 60%, you need to pay for 20 of those rooms out of your own pocket. So it's a risk if you don't get the people to take the rooms.
Yeah, it can really suck.
Question in the back?
Yes, so let's say I'm having my convention in a non-hotel related venue, like a rec center or a gym or something, or like a banquet hall or something like that. Is there a different strategy you would use to negotiate with them since it's not hotel related?
You find out what they want.
Absolutely. I can actually speak a little bit to this because that third year I was speaking about for DrawCon, we were actually at a university for that year. Typically, if they don't have hotel space, they have a lot less metrics they care about in terms of what looks good to corporate, because generally you're not going to have a big corporate in the background. So generally you're just negotiating, hey, we're going to bring people in, we'll pay you this much for the space that you're not using anyway, and they're just making that flat money. It's typically what you see, but sometimes they're going to want a little different. If you don't know, there's nothing wrong with asking, what they're looking for out of an event, how you can collaborate with them, because they should always see it as a collaboration, especially if it's not a hotel.
Yeah, and then I have a follow-up. So I know that most conventions are usually held in like major metropolitan areas of big cities and stuff. I'm thinking about starting my own con, but like in my town, just kind of like a smaller town. Are there any additional challenges to opening a con, like in a small town?
You'll have less attendees. Like I was at Pine Fir Con in Portland, Maine a couple months ago, and it was first year con went well. They only had 400 people there.
That's more people than we ever got at Technicon. Like, the big year at Technicon was the year that we got George R. R. Martin in, and it's like that was like 100-person jump from like 250 to 350. So like, there's a con that we work that the DI work in Chicago. It's 100 people, and they're kind of happy with that. So you don't have to have a big con to have a comfortable con. Just be solvent.
And getting back to Pine Fir Con, that con was a success because they planned accordingly. It was a small hotel, smaller function rooms. They did well.
Yeah. What you need to do before you jump into a con in a smaller area is kind of analyze who you're expecting to come. Are you expecting it to just be the locals, or is there some sort of attraction in that town, like Portland, Maine? You might expect some people to come out because it's a cool town, people know about it. But is there an attraction that will draw people in from outside of the area? How many other conventions are in the area? What time of year are those conventions? See who you're up against, see where those dollars are going, and figure out who you're expecting to come. Figure out how many people you think will come, and make sure you plan for that. And another thing I cannot strongly enough recommend, always plan smaller rather than larger. If you believe you're going to be somewhere between 1 and 200, plan for 100. Because I can say from experience working BronyCon 2012, where we actually hit fire code at the venue and had to stop taking pre-reg, telling people we are full up, we cannot take any more registrations, is a surprisingly good problem to have because it gives an air of exclusivity. It's like, wow, this is so popular, they literally can't take any more badges. That is a better problem to have than, getting too many people in the venue and then you actually break fire code and then you actually have the fire marshal come down, and that happened in the previous BronyCon, and I won't get into that.
That can be super awkward. So, the other thing you don't want to do is ever sell more tickets for something than you have the capacity for. That is an event. That is a mistake. I'm thinking way farther back at the moment. Back in
I know what he's thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking New York Strike. This is like back in the 70s when Star Trek was, the original series and was a big thing, and it was real popular, and they were just like, let's keep selling tickets. And so there were like lines out the block, out the building and around the block, and it's like these people can't actually come in, but they were told that they could buy things, and so don't do that.
A big thing for some people were asking about various non-traditional venue space, something to look into if it's a resource that's available. If you are an alum to a university, see what's available. Some universities are very, very, very welcoming and will give you discounts or preference for doing that.
Speaking of universities, this is another cautionary tale I really want to bring up. Please read your contracts. Please speak with the students on campus if you're working with a university. Universities are great resources. The precursor to DrawinCon occurred at a university. 100 people showed up. We had a blast. It was 2 days. People stayed in the dorms. It was great. The second time we went to a university, we neglected to speak with the students on campus to understand what they were telling us, because they were telling us, this is the weekend after finals. There's a ton of bored students on campus looking for something to do. You'll have free run of the student center. All the food options in the student center are going to be open, so there's food on site. It's going to be awesome. What they didn't tell us was they changed the schedule for the food vendors 2 days before our event, and they closed the day before our event started, so there was no food on campus. And all those students they said were going to be kicking around and bored. Well, apparently at this university, once you finish your finals, they ask you to leave within 24 hours, and you're not allowed to come back. Otherwise, you're considered trespassing and may be arrested for it because they need to go out and do lawn maintenance and clean out the dorms and things. So they want you gone. So we showed up expecting a captive audience of people, and it turned out we had 30 to 35 people on site, 3 of which were not staff or panelists. That is what killed that convention. So please, if you're going to work with a university, especially if it's one you didn't go to yourself, talk to some just random people on the ground. Hey, what's this weekend usually look like after finals? Or what is this, what's the pulse on this? What are people here into? Talk to them before you make any agreements, because that's something that we overlooked, and it can absolutely easily kill a convention.
Yeah, the sci-fi con that I helped run with out of the university, you know, that was being run as an activity of a student organization. And that is a great way to get access to a lot of resources. There's a lot of things student organizations can do for relatively cheap, and there's actually funding resources available to that. We, a number of years, we were getting like our standard $1,500 grant, but you know, if you do the paperwork and you put forth the justifications to the right places, you can get a lot more money than that. So there's a lot of resources available to student organizations trying to do things. There's nothing wrong with running a furry student organization on a campus. That was also a thing that my university had. So it's a way to do it. It's not necessarily the best way, it's just a way, and it's probably a good place if it's convenient for where you are. Because the problem that you might run into with a university is function space is pretty readily available. I mean, we ran events just like in a classroom building, because there's big lecture halls and there's small ones. You got panel space. Clearly, there's nowhere to sleep nearby, so we had to run an off-site hotel. Sometimes you can get ones where you can get access to dorms because you can rent dorms for stuff. But you know, universities have function space, they don't necessarily have all the other stuff that you want associated with the con. So
Yeah, and those are usually better for one-day events if you can do it, unless you have some sort of deal for the dorms for overnight, because you're going to have to rely on locals only if you don't have somewhere for people to sleep.
there's always a hotel next to a university. The question is, can you afford it?
Yeah, that's the thing.
And getting to reading the contracts, again, for some of the venues, there's sometimes some really weird things that happen, like fees for moving chairs, fees for like setting up chairs, fees for setting up tables. In this venue, for example, like stringing wires, that has to be done by electricians. So we have to make sure, in our case, our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. So we had a lot more upfront negotiation in which we asked the DLCC, like, what are the rules here? And so now for setting up like AV, electricians and Teamsters and the other various worker types come in at certain times. But we actually had some wiggle room there for negotiation. We said, hey, can our volunteers do this as well? And the DLCC was very cool with that because they were still getting money from us, but we were throwing some of our volunteers towards that. Yeah. But that was definitely a negotiation.
Yeah, you cannot do that one at random. You have to plan that out in advance because it's a union shop, so you're basically a guest in their home. They may let you do stuff, but you got to ask for that. You really don't want a grievance if you're in a union facility. The nice thing is, if you're a small con just trying to get started, you can probably avoid working in a union space. And I'm not saying avoid unions or anything. I'm just saying it's an extra layer of complication and negotiation and penalties if you screw stuff up. A lot of smaller hotels, like your Holiday Inn with a pool and a couple of big rooms and maybe a couple of small rooms. Not often is like everything you do going to be a union-related event.
And also sorry, Jay, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say on that note too, there's going to be a lot of very esoteric language in any contract you're offered.
Get a lawyer.
Get a lawyer. There's no shame in paying for a lawyer, even if you elect not to move forward with it. Have a lawyer read over it if you have any question. Don't just assume that you're understanding it correctly. You're probably not. And that can come back to bite you.
Get the right kind of lawyer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different branches of law, and you want somebody who's got experience in that, especially because, again, they're complicated and challenging. Kit!
Or you get yourself an industry agent that'll cost your event nothing.
Yeah, so there are ways to do that, where you get somebody who kind of takes their cut off of, say, the room block stuff, and
there's a few organizations that do that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, MFF has had people sort of beating down the doors to get in on some of that. And in MFF's case, they've not done it because the contracts that we do have with hotels are things that we want to protect. That's probably a good segue. Once you do sort of get into a contract with a hotel, which is more of a sustainment activity than an initiation activity, you really want to try and protect the relationship with the facility if it's good, and you want to try and make it better if you can. But it is a relationship, and it is an interaction between people. Venues are going to eventually trade out the people who are doing stuff as people move on in their own careers, and you're probably going to change who's handling your contracts for stuff. But as you said, it's a cooperation between the two organizations. It really is.
Yeah.
It is.
It's mutual benefit.
You want to have your event, they want to make money. These two things do go together pretty well, but you want to make sure you don't get into a hostile thing, and you really want to make sure that you don't accidentally start taking them for granted is a great way to put it. Because if you have, I'm not going to name names on events, but it is a thing that can happen where you might have a hotel that's going to give you a pass this year on some of your damage fees because it happens and they're in a good mood, or I've been to an event where they're like, we're just not going to clean up after the event that is right before you because it just doesn't matter. Manifest on that one. So like there's little things, but you want to make sure if your hotel is giving you a pass on a damage fee, you might go, thank you very much, we appreciate that, but don't expect that on a year-over-year basis, and figure out how to prevent that sort of shit from happening as you go forward. Like, those are the sorts of things, because the problem is if they've got to repair stuff, they can't sell that space. If that's a busted hotel room, it's out of service until that stuff is fixed. If it's a busted toilet, that costs them.
I was just like, so essentially just don't become rainforest.
Well,
I'm not going to say that.
Okay. Yeah, we weren't going to name names there, but...
So here's the big thing with rainforest, and this is the phrase I like to use, and it's expectation management. Yes, it is. Yes, it is a cooperation between the venue and your event, but as he already said, you could be there for 20 years. That 20th year, you are still a guest in that venue.
Yep.
And the expectation management is similar to what he's saying. Just because they're smiling and nodding, if you're not actively checking in and seeing what their expectations are, then that mismatch can spiral out of control.
And MFF, for example, has a great relationship with the Hyatt staff. Like, we deal with the same people on a regular basis. It's a fairly cooperative relationship, but it's still a business relationship. And it's a really interesting thing because, again, you can be super friendly. Like, I'm on great terms with a couple of people who are the the facility managers there. It's great. I love to see them. I'll talk to them if I'm in the Hyatt for something else. It's still a business relationship.
And I was thinking just that you shouldn't take the relationship for granted. Don't treat the contract that you negotiate the very first year as being permanent, because things change, and if you and the venue get along well, things can improve. Actually, this is going to be a horror story.
No, it's not. I'm just looking at Dragor because we're talking about. Even if you have a contract that's good for 3 years, that doesn't mean that after year 2, the hotel's not going to come back and go, we really want to change this.
And that can happen, and it can be highly stressful, and so essentially it is a business deal. One of the hardest things to do that I literally just went through, and with Crimson's help especially, is that you essentially can't attribute to malice what probably is going to be come out of a business desire.
Yeah. They may not say it up front either, which is part of the challenge.
And it's difficult, and we were very, very, very stressed out for quite a while getting to it, and all it really turned into was the hotel had certain things that they were unhappy with and used that as bargaining chips. We had things we were unhappy with that we used to counter-negotiate with, and at the end of the day, we walked out of the meeting going, I can't believe we stressed out over that. They never wanted us to leave, but
they sure didn't. It sounded like it at the time.
It was just business. It was bluffing. Now there's no guarantee that what we went through could have been just bluffing. It could have been a lot stronger than what it was, and that's where the whole expectation management comes from. One of the things to watch out for, and this is once you get into more multi-year things, is we did have a multi-year contract. Ownership of the venue changed. The people that were on site were mostly the same that we were used to. Upper management was not used to us, and to a certain extent did not care. So we had to, in a way, despite being in our 5th year, had to go out of our way to reprove ourselves, and not to the people that run the event. We had to reprove it to the organization that's looking at it from these people tweeted at us, and we treat Twitter as rule of law for how people perceive our brand. So to us, your 5th year event went off the rails, screw you. That's not what ultimately happened when it got resolved, but that was the knee-jerk reaction to what was we were used to it, the hotel was used to it, new management was not.
Is there anything else? I mean, we definitely want to open up for questions.
Yeah.
Probably about 15 more minutes.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to cover is when you interact with your venue, well, there's a reason I'm wearing a shirt and tie here. Definitely. What, did you like this tie?
No,
It
I'm
came
just
with the
thinking-
shirt. It came with the shirt.
What he's about to say, don't do what I do.
Yeah, don't be dreadful.
But we do strongly recommend, when you're having business meetings with the hotel, guys, a shirt and tie, ladies, dress business professional, because you want to pass yourselves off as professionals, and they'll treat you the same in return. And it's just an appearance thing. I will be dressed much differently at con horror stories later, but
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for going in and looking like them.
yeah.
That's, I mean, it's a visual thing. That's really kind of getting into just manipulating people for your own benefit. But like, when I went to that meeting with Dragor in the hotel and everything, I rolled up in, collared shirt and slacks. I was there representing the security contingent, so I didn't need to be in a freaking suit, but, it's my preference is to look more or less like the people that I'm going to be working with when I'm doing something like that. If you're working with a hotel, you all can look out here and see what people at a hotel tend to wear when they're working. That's a good place to start. I'm wearing a geeky t-shirt right now because I'm not having any responsibilities, and that's great. And if they stop you at random, you might be doing business like that, but it always helps to put them on a good footing by dressing like them.
Yeah, definitely. I did have one other topic that I wanted to mention. One last thing about starting your own convention, and kind of actually stepping all the way back to the start with budget. It's one thing I didn't get to say. Where is your money going to come from is a huge question you need to ask yourself. And the question you really need to boil it down to is, once you have everything planned and you kind of know, okay, we're looking at this venue and this contract, haven't signed it yet. We're looking at maybe doing this much for a couple of VIPs. We're maybe looking at doing this much for food and beverage and all that. Total that up, look at the number, and say, where is this money going to come from if I'm the only person who shows up in that venue on that day?
Yeah, it's risk management.
Yep, that's risk management. You need to have a plan for if nobody shows up, because whether people show up or not, you're still liable for that. A lot of people don't consider that. I actually have a story of a convention that never managed to get off the ground out in Tennessee, but did actually send someone to bankruptcy. This individual signed a contract with the Nashville Hotel or Marriott Airport, something or other, to the tune of $110,000. This person had me assisting them. They had not gotten an LLC set up yet, and they were anticipating that by getting one specific VIP from the fandom they were in, they were going to draw enough people to make up for that amount of money. I managed to talk them down from attempting it, because that would have been a nightmare for the fandom on top of themselves. However, they wound up having to go into bankruptcy to pay off some of that contract, because the contract said you still owe half if you cancel over 90 days out. Even though they canceled the next day, they still owed half of $110,000 as someone who's just kind of working class. You need to think about that before you sign anything.
Don't sign that contract.
Yeah, no.
And do incorporate.
Do incorporate at least an LLC or something.
Yeah.
But hotels are not going to be upset after a negotiation if you say, okay, I'd like to take this back, have some of my people on my team look it over, and we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. They're not going to be upset with that. You might have to move a weekend if they've gotten someone else to book the space, but they're not going to be upset with you for not taking it immediately. They'll actually probably respect you a little bit more for being considerate and thinking about what you're signing. It shows that you know what you're doing and you're actually putting due consideration into it and not treating it like, the same as buying a fursuit. Oh, I'll buy that. Here you go. Here's $2,000. You're actually thinking about.
It should go without saying that if a venue or a vendor of any kind is pressuring you to sign on the dotted line today, that's a red flag.
Yeah, you do not want to work with that organization if they're pressuring you to sign immediately, because that tells you something's wrong on their end and they're really hurting for the money.
Yeah, the nice thing is if you're just starting up at FurryCon, there's a lot of hotels that'll fit your event.
Yeah.
You have a lot more flexibility than trying to fit an Anthrocon or a MagFest or an MFF, which are, in the multiple thousands of people. That gets much, much harder to deal with. But when you're talking 100 to 300 people, that fits in a lot of spaces.
Yeah.
Heck, you get pick of the litter at that point. It actually, in a weird way, is easier to negotiate.
Yeah.
Like for First Squared, for example, we're finally we've been butting up against the limits of our hotel for a little bit. We're not at the point where we really have to move. We don't want to move, mainly because the amount of venues that fit the size we're essentially at an in-between stage.
Yeah.
We have outgrown just about every other hotel in the region, and the next step up is a level of cost per attendee that we're not comfortable going to yet. So we're having to look into interesting options for our next couple of years, like how long can we get some growth to make when we finally do the leap a bit easier, not just on us, but at some point attendees get used to an event, and if things change drastically, especially cost, you might lose a contingent of the people that went to your event, especially if you're more locally focused. There's no exact answer for that. It's a bit of a balancing act.
True, but I do think that local cons tend to attract people who won't go to Anthrocon, for example. It's too far, there are people who just don't travel that much and can't do it, but they'll definitely pop in for one night, or they'll do a couple, do a weekend pass and commute.
I've Ubered to cons before.
Yeah.
Like for a day.
Heck, there's a sci-fi con that's like 10 minutes from my house. I don't get a hotel room.
Is that Windy City?
It's WinnieCon.
I want to go this year finally.
You totally should. And
stay at his house.
Our place,
Yeah, I mean,
but like I go and drink, and that's fun. Like, it's low key though. Like, so if they moved, I'd probably still go to that one. But there's other ones where it's like it's 45-minute drive, and that's too much. I'll fly out to this crap, but it's. In any case, there's people who will only go because it's super convenient to them, and I wouldn't discount those people as being valuable to your event if you're small and that's comfortable. You may run into a point in which you have to go, for the good of the event, I can't cater to those people anymore. There are hard decisions about as your event grows. The nice thing is you don't necessarily have to make them right away. Like, you don't have to be like, I'm sorry you can't afford this $5 increase in badge prices, but now that the event's 1,000 people, that's $5,000 more we can spend on something else. We didn't talk about budgets a whole lot, but there's not a lot of ways that your event can raise money to spend on stuff, right? You sell tickets, you sell dealers' room spots, you get concessions from your hotel.
And the only way you can start making that money in is to have already agreed to money. So no matter what your first year, you're going to start in the red and build back out from there. You have to have agreed to pay for a space before you can start making the money on that space. So it's a little scary.
Now what I found
also why you should start small.
So what I found helpful is I ran a standalone event once. It was just a weekend thing, and you know which one I'm talking about. Yeah, it was a weekend thing. And I talked to some hotels, I started putting together some spreadsheets with numbers, and it's like, all right, this is how much it's gonna cost me. And what I did was, in Google Sheets, I made a 2x2 grid where I had one axis was amount that I would be charging with the projected number of attendees, or excuse me, I had amount that I'd be charging, another grid was projected number of attendees, and I kind of filled in, I did the multiplication, and I could see, all right, this price point and these attendees are going to bring in this amount of revenue, and I started doing some color coding, and it sounds silly, but it actually gave me something I could look at and start comparing that versus numbers, going, okay, like this band is highly likely to happen, and these adjacent bands are less likely to happen, and I think I made a $200 profit from that.
Yeah, which is actually good because we've had a number of those events that didn't.
Yeah.
One of the things you want to look at for starting a new event, and I see your hand, is look at the history of other events, especially in their first years, see how many people showed up, and if Wikifor has it, look up what the ticket prices were for it, and you can just start roughly ballparking, on average, here's the total gross income that this 350 person event, here's what they tend to make, here's what at a high level they pulled in, here's at a low. You can reach out and ask like, hey, what was your contract? What'd you pay for convention space at this? We help each other. The reason you see a lot of staffers cross-pollinating between these events, sometimes even across the country, is because we know what we all have gone through to get here, and if we could make another event's lives go a little bit more easily, for the most part, we try and do that.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing about furry fandom is that it's extremely cooperative, so you can ask people.
And on that note, just to throw this out for a very low-cost effort to try, or a very low-cost option to try and gauge interest, consider running some furry panels or a furry track at another con. Anthrocon grew out of the furry track at PhilCon. FCN got started that way from a science fiction con in the area. And
MFF out of DuckCon.
came out of DuckCon.
In fact, funny thing is, DuckCon doesn't exist anymore, so.
One of the things that I'm going to pimp out, and then we'll get to your question, is there is a group called FCLR, Furry Convention Leadership Roundtable. It's it was founded by Duncan.
And Takasa.
Wow, Duncan and Takasa started it, and then I think Path and Olafin have big roles in it currently. I know Path does, Path Heine. And essentially, that is a resource. There's a Telegram group, there's a mailing list. Essentially, you get like 3 board members from your event to participate in it. And the whole idea is free exchange of information, questions on policy, floating ideas across each other. Sometimes it's as simple as trying not to step on each other's toes for dates. There are more furry conventions, not just meets. There are more furry conventions than there are weekends in the year.
Yep. But the nice thing is, if you're running an event in, say, let's go the DC area, you're not. If you're running a small event in the DC area, you're not really competing with a small event in, Vancouver or LA or any of that stuff. You guys aren't drawn from the same people, but you probably don't want to be on the 4th of July weekend.
Yeah.
Or the weekend after Thanksgiving.
And the bigger you get, the less latitude you have in being closer to other bigger events. So like if MFF and Anthrocon were a weekend apart, that would be pretty crazy and both events would suffer.
Yep.
All right, so I've skipped. Did you still have a question?
Marketing for your con and outsourcing for staffing.
Ooh.
So marketing.
Let's do marketing first.
Marketing. If you are first squared, we effectively have done little to none of it, and somehow we're still here.
Yep, a lot of that's going to look like table trades and putting flyers at other conventions, getting permission to put your wares out at other conventions, locally or big ones, because conventions like this will have people from your local area.
Yep.
A lot of it's also going to be social media.
Yeah,
just trying to post a ton on social media and get
like
attention.
crazy.
Tweet like crazy.
It's cool to see people being able to run a con these days with tools like social media. Back in my day, but seriously,
I'm too young for this conversation.
it is because I mean, when I was doing Technicon in 2004 to like 2008, so really pre-social media for the most part. What do? You go to other events, you get table swaps, you put flyers out in your local area. There's a lot of options there, and the cool thing is that we don't live in a world where furry is not really mainstream. Like nobody's, depending on where you live, I can't speak to your locality, but particularly if you're in a college town, you can get away with posting a lot of fairly furry shit out there, and nobody's going to give you problems for it. So
I mean, heck, I have it in my queue at work. Most people don't care anymore.
right, like there's a lot of cool resources. Now you can use social media to boost that as well. So like marketing is definitely a time-intensive job. Cool thing is sometimes you can, we promoted Technicon one year by going to local sci-fi con, getting a table out in the other events tables sections, which a lot of cons have, and hosting a party.
Yep.
And that was great because it allowed us to apologize to a former guest and get them back.
One of the things for marketing is to a certain extent, you want yourself to stand out via perhaps contrast. One of the things we finally started doing as far as buying ads on various websites, moral issues aside, any of the main sites, for Affinity especially, we get a lot of conversion traffic, and I've spoken to several attendees who showed up to our event for the first time and they found it through an ad. The place where we get the most conversion, and this has also been happening for Dragon Show as well, is you run your ad perhaps a little bit contrary to the site that it's on. The big example I'm going to use is E621. In general, people are blind to the other adult advertisements that run on E621, but something like a G-rated or silly con advertisement, different to the other things that are primarily on that site, stand out. I can't tell you how many times we've had conversions through E621. And we asked them, like, why did you click that? Didn't you have another task in mind when you were visiting that site? And honest to goodness, we've had several people go, well, yeah, but that was different, and I clicked on it, and now I started doing something else, right?
It's not like
Okay.
Foursquare is an especially wholesome convention.
On that wonderful note, I think we had a couple of other questions.
No, there was
too.
a good follow-up. So I do want to hit on you asked about outsourcing. What do you mean when you ask about outsourcing?
Going through a separate company for staffing. Or
I'm not sure if you can afford it.
Yeah.
It's not cheap. Now, the cool thing to think about is there are certain jobs that are not very expensive. Overnight security is not actually that expensive in most places. You might be surprised at how little it ends up costing you to get somebody to do loss prevention overnight. There's stuff like that which you can, there's other challenges associated with bringing in people who aren't part of the fandom to do some of these jobs. There are places where it will be a better choice for your event to spend money than it is to spend people time. But if you're small, look at what it's going to cost and look at what you think. The problem is you only have so much money that you're going to be able to spend, right? You're going to guess that you're going to make a certain amount. Every single dollar you should think about when you're doing this event, how is it making the attendee experience better? If it's filling a critical staff role, like, we've got a guy who's going to sit in the dealer's room overnight so that nobody steals anything, yeah, that's probably worth $100 a day. To not have to have a staffer do that same thing. But, is it worth what it costs to get a network drop in this space? Is it worth what it costs to outsource it? You are the only ones who can make that decision. It's an interesting balance between what volunteers do I have available to support this event? What can I afford to spend to free up a volunteer to do something else?
A big thing too for that, and this also gets into budgeting, and you do have to be careful in terms of how many you give out, but the cost of an attending badge, waiving that to have someone be part of your event, this is essentially the bribe to get people on staff. The cost of an attending badge is usually way, way, way less compared to what you get out of the person that is happy to receive it.
That said, sometimes your event's so small it can't afford to let go of that money. Technicon still charged staff a fee. That was a reduced fee. There was a discount for staff, but we still depended on every freaking dollar of that. And that was an established con. That was a thing where it was just sort of how it was. Like, it was also traditional at that event for the con chair to buy a sponsor membership and go to the dinner. Like, when it's small, sometimes that's what your budgets look like.
We got down to 11 minutes left, and I see one hand. So
Yes,
we start doing questions.
There's actually two questions.
Yeah, so I remember earlier you guys mentioned like hotel damage and stuff like that. I think that brings to us quickly question. With real big, as your con gets bigger, more people show up. There's a bigger chance of people, getting rowdy or out of control. So, like, what's a good way to deal with like safety or security related issues with cons?
Dorsai.
I'm biased in that.
Ask that.
Yeah, so real quick is to have somebody who's responsible for following up on that stuff. There are a lot of different ways that you can run convention security. I have very strong opinions about it that I'd be happy to talk about some other time. I think that we do a good job. I also know that we're pretty full. That said, a really small gig, sometimes very easy to make work.
Yep.
The key thing is basically you want to make sure that you're taking it seriously. That is, again, an area where it might be the best thing you can do is hire some people in from a local private security company. And I think Furry might be doing a little bit of that to supplement. We've talked about
Yes,
that.
the contract's going back and forth still, as always. Actually, no, we finally signed something.
Sweet. But the short answer is don't ignore it.
Right.
Yeah, and we make it a point to tell our hotels, Anthrocon, if any of our attendees are being a problem, we want to know about it.
Yeah.
And a couple years ago, I think he somehow lit his rug on fire in his hotel room or something.
I don't remember that one.
What?
I mean, there's so many.
I'm reading between the lines, like, I think I could figure out what was going on, doesn't really matter, but the hotel brought that to our attention, and we said, did this person reimburse the hotel? And they said no, and we said, we don't want them back, and the hotel seemed really happy to hear that, and I don't even think they bill us.
Yeah, so that's actually,
I
that
see
is
a
key.
hand.
Can we get this gentleman in the blue shirt who's had his hand like up and down a bunch of times?
Oh, I was just thinking, I mean, the thing with not wanting security problems or behavior problems to escalate year after year, and it seems to me that a lot of aspects of running a con, there's sort of an economy of scale that you have to deal with.
Yes.
Like, I mean, Giza, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's my understanding that the first several years of Anthrocon, that the setting up of the art show and dealer's den was done entirely by volunteers, but
That was when we were in Philly at a smaller, not union-controlled venues, yes. Then we came
Yeah.
to Pittsburgh, and then we had
and
to hire
then eventually
Teamsters.
they ended up hiring the Teamsters Union because it just basically just got to be far too large a job to be done.
Yeah, more
Well, there were
payrolls and whatnot.
legal-
There's other
Legal
There was no
aspects.
option not to.
Yeah, but it's nice sometimes. So there was an adjoinder back there?
So one of the other things, one of the things that's brought up is, as you grow, issues happen. Yes, straight up. And this is why I like to say expectation management.
Yep.
Any hotel venue that has had other events should, in theory, understand
Yeah.
that once you cross a certain amount of people, it's not, oh my gosh, we had an event. It's how many? What's the proportion? What's the severity?
And what are you doing about it? Because
what do
if you can buy a lot of goodwill by throwing somebody out. If they're a jerk to your facility, you just go, we don't want them here either. Pull their badge and go. You don't actually need security staff to do that. You just need
No.
a responsive con staff.
In general, one of the things that has worked for us and the various Midwest cons that I'm part of is, in general, we try to set it up with each hotel. If there is a problem that the hotel is dealing with first, we want to know. Like, we essentially ask for right of first refusal to deal with something if it's not an immediate call the police issue. And what that sets up is, you're trying to tell them, we want to police our own, we want to essentially be the ones that give them the warning, but essentially we want the hotel to be the final word / rule of law. If you have ejected someone from your event, but the hotel has not banned them from premises, that can get into a very awkward situation. The relationship that is at First Squared and several of these cons is, we tell the hotel, like at the meetings, we reiterate over and over and over again, if there's someone you don't want there, tell us, and they are no longer, if you've ejected them from premises, by default, that's a ban for us.
Yeah.
Hotels really like to
They do.
hear that. The bone you ask them to throw is, if possible, please try to rope us in and let us talk to it first. In general, with door science, noise complaints with rooms.
Yeah, they'll try and, what we like to do, particularly at smaller venues, is like, if you're getting a noise complaint, ping us first, and basically we add one more strike to the hotel's policy. Is we try and go up and talk to them and go, guys, here's how it's going to work. This is the progression of things. You are now using your first opportunity, and it's just one of those things where it's protecting your relationship with the hotel. If you have a hostile relationship with your hotel, it's miserable. I think many of us have been at events where the relationship between the facility and the event was not good. Mm-hmm. It is extremely uncomfortable for everyone. Either patch it up or leave is really the other thing to say there.
We did, I was part of, IFC did the leave option. Part of it was growing, and a large part of it was the relationship had deteriorated. It was part of buyouts and upper management changing, and just expectation management wasn't working so well.
MFF conveniently grew too fast to stay in the West and North Shore, but it was not a comfortable relationship in that facility either. We had 2 years, they were not pleasant, and we got out.
That was the first con I ever went to, and I'm asking people, like, is this normally how these things go? And everyone's like, no.
I mean, there was one question over here?
Yeah.
Yes?
Right. So I have a comment. As a comment, I just want to say thanks to you guys for putting this together. It's all been really insightful, helpful information. So I'm glad you decided to share your experience in organizing conferences. Secondly, question. So I'll be organizing for a local for a community in South Carolina. We've been around for years, and we've had people constantly coming to us saying, "Hey, when are we going to have a state-based con for our state?" And my response has always been, "Who's going to pay for it?" So I'm really glad you guys brought up the budget portion. I'm wondering, like, starting out, what were the strategies you guys used to get that money there, or was it all just on the individual?
I'm looking
So,
at people who started a con
In
recently.
in particular for First Squared, and this is, I don't want to say is normal or anything of that nature. The only real way I'll put this is Algly and myself, we knew going into this that we didn't ask anyone else, but it essentially was, we formed an LLC, we got the paperwork in order, and it was anyone who could help contribute seed money. There were essentially plans in place of this is what's owed, and we told everyone this balance might take a few years to make right. Everyone for this, some cons do it where there are interest that's accrued. We chose not to. Anything I gave for it, it took till year 3 for the initial seed stuff to get paid off. We decided, it was always board votes, and at any time, any of us could be like, hey, there's money in that bank account, give it. No one ever really did that because our own personal finances were okay. Don't put yourself, if you have to put yourself in personal financial jeopardy to run an event, don't. Essentially, you have to treat it as that first event. Anyone who's putting money into it should go from the expectation of it might suck, but you can't count on it coming back. And that didn't happen for us. IFC had some personal loans part of its founding. FCN, I believe the original board did that all out of their own pocket to begin with.
Anthrocon sold lifetime memberships very early on for $1,000 a pop.
Don't
back
do
in
that.
the late 90s.
Good.
I think we sold like 5 or 6 of them. This is before I
IFC
joined.
sold like somewhere in the range of like 20 plus lifetime memberships that are still difficult to deal with.
Wow. We've got time for I think 1 or 2 more questions because we're coming up on 4 o'clock. I see 2 hands.
One more question, because we want to talk about how to get in touch with us.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So, who'd you point
way
at?
back.
I went 1 and 2.
Okay, so you
We
in
can
front?
follow up with you afterwards if you want outside. If you
Oh,
want.
it's a wrap-up question.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sure, go for it. Your question.
Kind of an interesting thing, but along the same lines, for not just necessarily starting an event, but going into an event that's existing and they want to do, change of leadership, change the con, whatever, going into that and kind of taking over something. Are there any tips for that kind of?
So,
Don't burn bridges.
don't burn bridges. Talk to whoever had the job before you. No matter why they left, they're probably going to be willing to talk to the person that was stuck in the role after them. Even if they left on bad terms,
Yeah.
you probably weren't the reason for it. They'll probably be willing to talk to you.
Generally, and if they aren't, well, there's actually a fair amount of literature that's been written about that sort of a leadership situation. I don't have anything super specific, although there's some books about like just generally improving things, like Turn the Ship Around. It's really good. It's not directly on what your question is, but there's a lot of.
Management books are an asset for this.
And the
It
other
sounds like a joke, but they're actually,
Yeah.
I love reading them at this point, because if you're standing up a new department, or if you're taking over a department from somebody else, but the key thing is to be respectful of your volunteers.
And the other thing you can do if you really have questions is you can go to people in similar roles at other events and ask them for help too. They'll have some good insight for you.
Okay.
And that's time.
Contact.
We had that one
4
wrap
o'clock.
up in the back you agreed to?
Is it really fast?
It can be really fast.
Go,
It's
go.
just, what is the number one thing you wish you had known before starting this?
Stress.
Stress.
Oh, so, I mean, yeah,
Honestly,
I could give a whole panel on how to do stress management on this stuff, but you really and seriously need to understand that this is a lot of hard work. You have got to manage that work with your own health. I am in much worse shape if I do not go out and work out on a regular basis, and if I don't take time for the things that aren't con related, because I burn out. I've burned out like 4 times working on MFF in the last 2 years. So, and the thing is, like, the more often you do burn out stuff, the more likely you're gonna do it. But learn how to manage your own stress levels.
So to get in touch with us, if you DM Anthrocon, that comes to me, and I'll reply with our Twitter handles. That's the quickest route.
Yeah, that's
And if you want to hear more about when things go hilariously wrong, Convention Horror Stories will be tonight at 10 o'clock in 407. That's the lecture hall up on the 4th floor.
And the FCLR, the Furry Convention Leadership Roundtable, there's a bunch of info on the website, fclr.info. Check that out.
Google it.
It's
a SMUFCon for
furries.
furries.
Any of us that are running cons, and most of us will be happy to talk to you.
That's true.
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
just contact the general contact one with just like, hey, I'm curious about this. That's a great point. Like, we do this because we love it, not because it's fun, but because we love it. So we love to share that.
A little bit of Stockholm syndrome there.
Thank you all for
Yes.
coming.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Let's
Thank
get
you.
out of the way then. We wish you the best of success in your events, or in cheaply discovering that you don't want to do it.
Silver Gattoman, he bought me a coffee. Silver Gattoman, here is the song for thee. He likes to video all the panels at the cons. You should go and watch them whether they are short or long. Silver Gattoman, you video that's not a jibe. All of you go to his YouTube channel and like and subscribe.